I'm Dominic Nicholls, and this is Ukraine the latest. Today, as one of Russia's biggest oil terminals burns after an overnight strike, we report on another aerial blitz of Kyiv. We look at the latest tranche of European support for Ukraine, noting that German Chancellor Friedrich Merz has asked President Zelensky to stop the flow of young Ukrainian men fleeing to Germany. And later, we have an exclusive interview with the deputy head of the presidential office of Ukraine, who gives Kyiv's latest reaction to the ongoing corruption scandal that has engulfed President Zelensky's administration, and who says Ukrainian society this summer was at boiling point.
Bravery takes you through the most unimaginable hardships to finally reward you with victory.
Russia does not want peace.
Erstens, wir verteidigen mit unserer Hilfe für die Ukraine auch unsere Freiheit und unsere europäischen Werte.
If I'm president, I will have that war settled in one day, 24 hours.
We are with you, not just today or tomorrow, but for 100 years.
Nous ne pouvons pas, comme Européens, laisser gagner la Russie en Ukraine.
Nobody's going to break us. We're strong. We're Ukrainians.
It's Friday, the 14th of November, 3 years and 265 days since the full-scale invasion began. And today I'm joined by the Telegraph's executive editor for audio, Francis Dearnley. I started with the latest military updates. Let's go into Russia. One of Russia's biggest oil terminals has exploded in a fireball after an overnight drone strike by Ukraine. Blasts rocked the major oil export facility in the Black Sea port of Novorossiysk. The target was the Shattering oil terminal. Russian-affiliated media stated that the terminal is still on fire. Unverified footage shows a very large explosion, with columns of fire and smoke rising from the impact site. Russian authorities reported the oil terminal and a civilian ship were hit, and several coastal facilities damaged. Unconfirmed reports suggest Ukraine may have also hit an air defence system. The port has halted all oil exports following the attack, according to sources speaking to Reuters. Now, global oil prices jumped around 2% on supply fears after the attack. The Shattering oil complex serves as the endpoint of pipelines run by Russia's state-run Transneft, which operates the world's largest oil pipeline network. Footage taken by local residents showed a huge mushroom cloud explosion above the oil hub, turning the night sky red. Vyacheslav Kondratyev, who's the governor of Russia's Krasnodar region, said on social media Novorossiysk suffered the most. Overnight, more than 170 people and 50 pieces of equipment dealt with the aftermath of the attack, quickly extinguishing fires and assisting residents. President Zelensky just said, "Long Neptunes, we are producing more." Long Neptunes being the Ukrainian-produced long-range missile, which they've developed basically because the US weren't going to supply Tomahawk and the whole issue about Taurus with Germany, etc., etc. So many, many months ago, Ukraine decided, right, we'll do it ourselves. And they've come up with the Neptune and now the Long Neptune. Now, related to that, Ukrainian drones also attacked the Russian city of Saratov last night, striking the oil refinery there, according to local residents. That's the fourth time Ukraine has hit the Saratov oil refinery just in the last few months, just in autumn this year. Saratov Oblast Governor Roman Busargin confirmed that drones had attacked the region overnight and said that civilian infrastructure in Saratov had been damaged. Locals, however, said that it had been the Saratov oil refinery that had been hit. The Russian Ministry of Defense reported that air defense units shot down 45 drones over the area last night, didn't respond to those claims about the refinery being damaged. Now, that means Kyiv is reported to have hit more than 50% of Russia's 38 major refineries more than once so far in their long-range campaign. Now, let's go into Russian-occupied Crimea. And Ukrainian drones hit a military base there used for the storage and maintenance of Russian Orion drones. This comes from Robert Magyar-Brovdy, who's the commander of Ukraine's unmanned systems forces. He was speaking yesterday. That follows an attack early yesterday morning by the unmanned systems forces, which caused damage to the drone base. It's located at the Kurovsky airfield. There's no further details known about the success or otherwise of that strike. Russia's Orion drone, you may have come across these things. They're reasonably new. They're big, can carry up to 250 kilograms of explosives, and it's basically modelled on the US Reaper and Pred, that sort of family, but particularly the Reaper, the more modern one. That's the size of the thing that we're talking about. Now, meanwhile, what was happening inside Ukraine this morning? At least 6 people were killed in the Ukrainian capital and 27 injured after a large-scale combined drone and missile attack last night. Monitoring groups reported that upwards of 120 drones and decoys went for the capital. Moscow has attacked every district, we are told. 15 people were admitted to hospital, including a pregnant woman and 2 children, after explosions across the city. Missile and drones struck critical infrastructure and residential buildings. Emergency services rescued more than 40 people from fires and damaged buildings in 8 of Kyiv's 10 districts. Mayor Vitaly Klitschko described the strikes as a massive enemy attack. Now, Timur Tkachenko, who's the head of Kyiv's military administration, writing on Telegram, said the Russians are hitting residential buildings. There are a great many damaged multi-story apartment buildings in practically every district. The strikes left parts of the city without heating and facing warnings of possible power and water outages. President Zelensky said Russia had launched around 430 drones and 18 missiles in the overnight attacks. He said this was a deliberately calculated attack aimed at causing maximum harm to people and civilian infrastructure. Now, at the same time as the attack on Kyiv, Ukraine's Air Force reported waves of drones targeting the country's central, southern and eastern regions. Dozens of cruise and ballistic missiles were also launched towards, as well as the city, the other regions of Ukraine, the Air Force said. It comes as we see some gun footage released today by the Ukrainians showing an American minigun mounted to an old Soviet-era helicopter. I don't know if it's a Hind, it probably is, I would have thought, that's being used to shoot down Russian German drone. The footage that you'll find on social media shows an American-made M134 minigun, which can fire up to 6,000 rounds a minute, bringing down a drone with a large explosion at the end of it. Now, on the ground, we think there's little change inside Pokrovsk city, although it is extremely hard to tell and get accurate information out of there. But it looks as if Russia is about to achieve encirclement of Pokrovsk, which will also then threaten Minarad. Elsewhere, though, as we've been reporting this week, we've got to keep our eye on the area in Zaporizhia Oblast and Dnipropetrovsk Oblast. Russia is continuing, albeit slowly, but continuing to have a measure of success pushing west there. And just finally for me, the Ukrainian Kharkiv Oblast Prosecutor's Office said yesterday that a Russian strike had murdered 3 civilians and injured a 4th civilian that were heading south towards Borova. That's about 40 kilometres south of Kupiansk, up in the northeast of the country. These individuals were said to be on their way to receive humanitarian aid and pensions when they were on the P79 Kupiansk to Borova highway, when just north of Novoplatonivka they were hit by the drone. That's us with a military update. Come back a bit later. But Francis, what have you been looking at on the diplomatic front?
Well, thanks, Don. The lead political story of the moment continues to be the corruption scandal in Ukraine, with President Zelensky facing one of his most dangerous periods in office. And for more on that, do check out the interview with the deputy head of Zelensky's presidential office later in this episode, where Dom gives him a good grilling. I mentioned yesterday Kyiv will be desperate to get a handle on this story before it causes ruptures internationally, especially in the United States. And on that score, another story, which will no doubt cause sweaty brows in Kyiv, is that 2 companies registered in Ukraine that allegedly helped supply components for Iran's Shahed drones were among 32 entities sanctioned by the US Treasury this week. According to the Kyiv Independent, the 2 Ukrainian companies targeted, Ecofera and Imperative Ukraine, are involved in operating under an Iran-based procurement agent. Now, Ukraine has a formal export control regime for military and dual-use goods that is, at least on paper, stringent during wartime, particularly for components that could be used by Russia. And Ukrainian agencies and advocates have long highlighted, however, how sanctions evasion channels Western and especially US-made electronics into Russian drones. So it is possible that the companies are unaware their components are making their way into Iranian drones via these roundabout routes. We don't know. But the political consequences in a week like this could be serious if a narrative is about to accelerate. Brussels, as I said yesterday, may need to make stronger overtures to Kyiv and perhaps assist in trying to arrest those, for instance, who fled the country, a key subject of discussion in Dom's interview with the presidential office. The European Commission this week delivered another tranche of short-term financial relief to Kyiv as talks over the much larger reparations loan based on frozen Russian assets remain mired in that political deadlock until at least December. 8 Baltic and Nordic NATO allies also announced yesterday they'll fund a $500 million package of US-sourced military equipment and munitions for Kyiv under the Pearl initiative. Those countries are Denmark, Estonia, Finland, Iceland, Latvia, Lithuania, Norway and Sweden. What an epic grand tour that would be. Speaking of which, President Zelensky is expected to visit Greece over the weekend to sign an agreement in the energy sector. That's his second visit to Athens since the invasion. He was last there in August 2023, I think. The reported agreement comes as Ukrainian cities continue to, of course, be pummeled by Russian attacks on energy infrastructure, as Dom was just talking about. So it really speaks to the urgency of that issue, I think. Unfortunately for Zelensky, he won't be able to spend any time at the Parthenon as he'll be heading straight to Paris after those talks for a meeting with President Macron, where they too will be discussing, as we understand, energy, economic and defence fields, as well as progress in preparing security guarantees for Ukraine under the Coalition of the Willing framework. No doubt they'll also be chatting about one of the major issues raised in Zelensky's call with Friedrich Merz yesterday, where the German Chancellor told Zelensky to stop allowing young Ukrainian men to flee to Germany, following the new rule introduced in August, as we reported, allowing Ukrainian men under the age of 23 to travel abroad. That speaks to Berlin's own domestic pressure, as in many European countries, on the subject of immigration, but also an awareness of just how serious Kyiv's manpower crisis may become. So for more on that, I'd again point listeners to my interview on Monday with Dr. Jack Watling of RUSI, who's really insightful on this issue both in Ukraine and in Russia. And for more on Germany and its response to the war, do listen back to yesterday's episode with our Berlin correspondent James Rothwell. Lots of you have written in on the latest revelations about Hitler's private parts in particular. And Dom's looking at me rather bemused because I don't know if you listened to that bit yet.
I didn't know he had a private plane.
Parts. Private parts.
Private part. I knew of private parts once.
Yeah, anyway. If you're as bemused as Dom is, do check out that episode yesterday.
We also had a Staff Sergeant whose surname was Cumberpatch, and he was our Squadron Quartermaster Sergeant. He was a good bloke anyway. He's probably deserving of the title, but you always call the Quartermaster the Q. And I'm pretty sure he was manoeuvred into that position just so that we would all call him Q Cumberpatch. That's true. That's the story. I'm not making it up.
I don't doubt it. I just feel sorry for the chap.
Well, yeah.
Anyway, sticking with Europe, Hungary's trying to claim that it received an exemption for an unlimited period from sanctions on Russian oil and gas. But that's now been contradicted by US Secretary of State Marco Rubio, who says it's only for 1 year. Now, that, of course, really matters to Budapest, so expect that to rumble on, as well as their desire to see that Trump-Putin summit go ahead. Interestingly, a journalist also asked Rubio whether his assessment was that Russia doesn't really want peace. And he replied, Russia demands the rest of Donetsk, which Ukraine can't accept. They keep striking Ukraine's grid to demoralise it, losing about 7,000 soldiers a week. Now, I should say that estimate is lower than others that I've seen, but nonetheless, that is the figure that the US is willing to say. He went on, their actions show no real interest in peace. So that line is holding for now. But Dom, to end on a lighter, but I still think interesting story, which wraps up some of the sections we've talked about in recent weeks. I know that you were very invested in Eurovision and its Russian rival, Intervision, especially its winner, Vietnamese singer Duck Fuck.
God, we're going to get emails again.
Yeah, I know that's not how you pronounce it, but anyway, can't resist. 2 stories this week of pro-Russian singers being banned from performing in European countries. So Russian rapper Morgenstern, who I imagine you listen to every morning, Dom.
I do.
He's been banned from entering Lithuania for 10 years after the government deemed him a potential threat to national security. He was scheduled to perform in Vilnius later this month, but the mayor has said the city is not a guest house for Putin worshippers. Also, a Limp Bizkit concert in Tallinn has just been cancelled due to the singer's pro-Russian views. Its American frontman Fred Durst expressed support for Russia after the start of the war in Ukraine, calling Putin a great guy and calling Crimea Russian. The Estonian Ministry of Foreign Affairs, that's how high up it goes, has said there is no place in Estonia or its cultural space for supporters of an aggressor state. Now, I raise this just because it speaks to how seriously some countries are taking the war and the perceived dangers of Russian narratives versus others. But it's knotty, isn't it? Is this censorship? Is it overreach? I can't imagine this happening in Britain. So I'm really interested to hear your perspectives in those countries and just generally elsewhere. But what do you think, Dom?
Yeah, it is a tricky one. I mean, we had it recently here in London, didn't we, with the Russian opera diva. What was that? I can't remember her name.
Yeah, she was performing at, was it Turandot? I can't remember, one of the operas.
Yeah, and whether or not she should have been able to sing. She herself said that she'd been vocal against Putin. It was pointed out to her she'd said some very soft things about him, but that was when she was in the country, and she basically made the point that that's what you have to do to survive. So, an interesting point. Should she have been allowed to sing, etc., etc.? It will rumble on. It's always unpleasant when you see politics entering culture, but I don't think you can really separate the two. Yeah, it is tricky. I'd have to examine my thoughts a bit. I don't have a very firm view on which to opine, but I would welcome anyone helping us out on that. Culture and politics, can they mix?
Shall we turn to Chatham House?
Yeah, go on then. Chatham was interesting. So Chatham House, there was an event on Tuesday of this week about the current state of the war and the future of Ukraine and European global security after the war. So it was a whole day Tuesday. You were there all day, Francis. I had to dash off somewhere else, but then I went in and ran a panel event early in the afternoon. Well, I was on their podcast, first of all, over lunch, so I missed lunch. Had to run my panel event with an empty, rumbly tum. But no, it was very interesting. There were some good speakers there. So you saw more of them than I did, because I was in kind of hair and makeup. But what did you make of the other panellists?
Yeah, well, I don't want us to dedicate too long on this because people can listen to them on the Chatham House website. But there were some interesting things. The Minister for the Armed Forces, who I know you're interviewing on Tuesday, Dom, if that's right,
yep,
Alistair Carnes. And as listeners will know, I have a background from working in Parliament, and it's always interesting seeing what the key lines he's been fed by his advisors and civil servants are. And some of them will be, of course, familiar, underscoring, not being critical of Trump, saying Trump's been key, that European NATO countries had not been paying their way and that Trump had changed that. He also asked, who was better prepared for World War II. He said, was it the Germans with Blitzkrieg or was it the French with the Maginot Line? Now, I mentioned that because he was really talking a lot about the future of war and the importance of various initiatives that are being taken at the moment. He says whoever integrates autonomous systems most effectively will be ready for the next conflict. And he said Europe had eroded its industrial base. He also talked about Russian casualties having already surpassed those of America throughout the entirety of the Second World War. He said the nature of war doesn't change, only its character. When is the tipping point in Russia? He said, you are more likely in Britain to know a veteran today than an active soldier. Most people know about the military from films more than lived experience. Thought that was quite interesting, Dom. What were your reflections on that?
Yeah, I mean, that's probably true. It's a shame when we've just had Remembrance Day on Tuesday, Remembrance Sunday last weekend, and there's still this image of veterans being kind of old, Second World War era, black and white, shuffling around, etc., etc. And it's not. I mean, I'm a veteran. There's loads of veterans, but very young age. I'm not necessarily including myself in that. But, is it a problem for the MOD? Is it a problem for British society and society more broadly that people view veterans as old and broken when, that's absolutely not the case in the vast majority of people?
Because I suppose also, if you see veterans as being symbolic of the past, then you think wars are a thing of the past as well. That's the danger, right?
Yeah, I guess so. It'd be a very easy extrapolation from that. Yeah, no, interesting. I think it is the current concern. That I know he was Minister for Veterans Affairs before he sort of got promoted to be Minister for the Armed Forces, which is basically the second in command of the MOD. So no, they wrestle with this constantly. Every administration's wrestled with how to better serve the military veterans. I don't know if we'll ever get it right. Don't know which country really does necessarily get it right. But I was chatting to Ole Szymanski, who's Ukraine's Deputy Minister of Defence Minister for Veterans Affairs, bit of a clunky title. But anyway, he was over here asking about how we have come out of Iraq, Afghanistan and elsewhere and our relationship with veterans, because he says that Ukraine has got one almighty task about providing services to veterans after this. So he was over. Interesting guy. I will hope to pick up with him next time we're in Kyiv.
Another thing that Khan said was that the biggest contributor to the cost of living crisis in Britain is the war in Ukraine, just underscoring the cost of the war. And then he said, my view is whatever it takes, not least because if Ukraine fails, which I don't think it will, is things will be a lot more expensive. Quite a punchy phrase, that whatever it takes. I think that might be one to push him on when you interview him on Tuesday.
Yeah, 2 weeks before the budget.
There was another panel as well with some interesting bigwigs. So Bertrand Buchwalter, an advisor to Macron on European affairs, quite a lot of the usual platitudes one might hear, but he suggested that Macron was a driving force behind the coalition when the French president saw that there needed to be more of a strategic push from Europe. That would tally with our reporting at the time. Remember, he was being much more assertive in the days of my nickname Francophile Francis, because he suddenly started saying much punchier things. So I think that's been sort of confirmed, really. And there are other reports as well that it was the French who have been trying to be even more assertive than the British in some of those conversations, but then perhaps have recoiled back following some of the election results in France of late. Robin Brooks, former special advisor to Vice President Kamala Harris on Europe, was also on that panel. She was talking about the challenges in the Biden administration to persuading some European countries to do certain things. She said it was very hard for us to persuade Germany that Nord Stream was designed in part to make an invasion more likely. She also acknowledged the Biden administration was too slow to respond and that sometimes Britain and Europe felt that it had to act first, such as sending the Storm Shadows. And I then had the opportunity to ask her about what a Harris presidency would have looked like. And she said that, in her view, it would have been a continuation of the Biden administration. So we wouldn't have seen a massive ramping up of support. There wouldn't have been a profound shift. That, of course, would have had serious ramifications, I would argue, for Europe, because as we saw, it wasn't enough under Biden. So if it wouldn't have been enough under Harris, then even then, as we've always argued, it still would have been up to Europe to try and determine the outcome of this war. But she did say Harris, went to Europe to confirm Article 5, said Ukraine must be at the heart of any decisions about its future. She said that differs a great deal from President Trump. So no shocks there, but I thought interesting to see that confirmed. It wasn't as if she said, well, actually, Harris had a big plan and she was going to do this, that and the other. So I thought that was interesting. Sir Lawrence Friedman, also on that panel, he said, why is Putin not taking advantage of Trump? This is his chance. One, he believes Ukraine should be part of Russia. That's one of the reasons he's not willing to deviate from that point. And two, if it ends with a ceasefire, this will be an obvious failure as he's annexed more territories than he controls. So just underscoring that Putin has more to lose, arguably, from a ceasefire at the moment. And not only that, the fact that the realpolitik, which is being assumed that Moscow is functioning of, may well be wrong in terms of its ideological underpinning. So I just think an important point that we've discussed many times. He also emphasised that Trump will want to make a quick deal. And if that's not possible, Europe has to do most of the diplomatic heavy lifting beforehand. The next question, of course, being, is it? And then lastly, Ina Sovson, member of Ukrainian parliament, also speaking at Chatham, emphasised the absence of urgency, not only in the room in Chatham, but also just generally among European capitals at the moment. She emphasised how exhausted Ukrainian society is. She said, we need to recognise the fragility of this specific moment. And so I think that was another key takeaway, really, is that all of the Ukrainians who were speaking at Chatham were trying to underscore how just precarious the situation is and how banked in it seems that everybody's just taking that Ukraine can fight at this level, when really that is potentially dangerous, and not least in the context of the corruption things at the moment. But I don't know if you wanted to comment a little bit on some of the things that caught your eye that were said.
Yeah, there were some great contributions. I was speaking to some people in an off-the-record Chatham House dinner the night before, on Monday night, and a very strong message that came through there was that Donald Trump genuinely does want the war to end. Okay, we get that. He's not bluffing there, whether it's for business or whether it's for whatever, morality, whatever. He genuinely wants the war to end. But he's pretty, as you said, I think you alluded to, someone made the point about him being side agnostic. He doesn't really care who wins or how it ends, just wants it to end. And the point that was made to me by a European diplomat was that the first side, Ukraine or Russia, that comes up with a reasonable proposal will get his attention. And that is possibly, we've seen that with the long-range strikes against Russian oil and gas facilities, but it's still very much up for grabs. His attention span is, shall we say, pliable. So yeah, it seems to be whoever comes up with a good plan and backs it up will get his attention. But the point was then made, so if Europe leads, Trump will follow. If Europe really steps up and says, right, here's a plan, this is what we're going to do, this is the money we're going to put into it. Interesting, the Nordic and Baltic, we reported yesterday, the 500 million euro, things like that. More of that, please, Europe. And Donald Trump will seemingly say, yeah, okay, well, I'll lead from behind or whatever. And just on the frozen assets that we've spoken of, I heard it from a number of different people, a number of different places, that they really do expect movement in December, which is just around the corner. But it's the next meeting of and I'm going to get this wrong, we need the beardy one to either the European Council, Joe Barnes.
But it's mid-December, it's not like the 1st or 2nd, as one might hope. I think he said the 17th of December, I think. Don't quote me on that, everyone. It's a mid-December.
But I kept asking why there can't be an elegant solution, why we've not been able to work this out. We put people on the moon, for God's sake. We should be able to work out a way of unfreezing the Russian assets. And a number of different people said, yeah, very confident there'll be movement in December. Ihor Brusylov is deputy head of the office of the President of Ukraine. In London to attend meetings with Britain's Foreign Secretary and her team, I managed to grab some time with Mr. Brusylov for an exclusive interview. Each day this week has brought new developments in the $100 million corruption case, and attention is focusing on chief suspect Timur Mindik, a close associate of President Zelensky and co-owner of the president's Kvartal 95 production company. Before turning to military matters, Mr. Brusylov explained how Ukrainian society was judged to be at boiling point in the summer, which forced Kyiv to take the decision to allow young men to leave the country. But I started our conversation on the corruption scandal. And against the sound of the Royal Marines band on Horse Guards parade outside, I asked Mr. Brusylov, where is Timur Mindik? This is our conversation.
Ihor Brusylov, Deputy Head of the Office of the President of Ukraine. Welcome to Ukraine the Latest.
Thank you for having me.
Now, you're here in London. We're speaking in the lovely buildings of the Foreign Office here in central London. You're accompanying your Foreign Minister, Andrei Sybiha. He's meeting our Foreign Secretary about now. I'm told they're going to be talking about the United Kingdom-Ukraine 100-year partnership. They could be talking about coalition of willing, etc., etc. We will come to all of those points if that's okay. But I would like to start, please, with the big story of the week from Ukraine. Ukraine's National Anti-Corruption Bureau has charged 8 suspects with bribery, embezzlement and illicit enrichment in a large-scale corruption case involving the state nuclear power company Energoatom. The alleged ringleader is Timur Mindik, a close associate of President Zelensky and co-owner of the president's Kvartal 95 production company. 5 people have been arrested, but 2 other suspects, Mr. Mindik and businessman Alexander Shukerman, have fled. Earlier today, I see President Zelensky imposed sanctions on them. Mr. Brusylov, where is Timur Mindik?
I actually don't know where he is now. The only thing that I'm aware of is that he left Ukraine, and he had legal grounds for that because he's the father of 3 children, and it entitles you to have the opportunity to leave Ukraine in a legal, normal way, so to say. As for the rest, it's a little bit of media explanation that somebody is close to the president, somebody is the co-owner of something, but, well, this is not necessarily the case, because what you can see and read in the media does not always reflect the factual situation, real facts. And, well, everything will be done to sort out the situation. And according to the law, no exceptions will be made. If they are guilty, if they are culprits, they will be prosecuted to the strongest extent of the law. And notes of suspicion have been issued to the people. Now this is for the prosecutor's office to take care of that, to prove the case in the court for NABU and other anti-corruption bodies. That's actually what they were made for. And this will be taken to court.
Now, there are suggestions that he's in Israel. You say he would have been able to get out of the country as a father of three children. But how was that able to happen? Surely when this story broke on Monday, were the border service not informed and told not to allow him out of the country?
No, it's not the case. It doesn't work like that. He is a citizen of Ukraine. And if a citizen of Ukraine has 3 children, he has the right, if he has the right documents, to leave the country because of this reason. This is something that is established by the law. And it doesn't mean that you are this person or that person. It's a universal rule. So you may use it, or you can choose to stay, or whatever you do. So it doesn't limit your freedom of movement. This is the main idea of this provision in the law.
I'm just a bit surprised that they didn't have a note that he was not able to leave the country. Anyway, Justice Minister Herman Halushenko and Energy Minister Svetlana Hinchuk submitted their resignations yesterday, November the 12th. Were they right to take responsibility and resign their posts?
It's the normal reaction, and there is zero tolerance from the part of the leadership of Ukraine, from the president, even if there is the slightest suspicion that there is something wrong. People should submit their resignation requests. Doesn't matter if they're guilty or not. Now, this is the case for them to prove whether they were involved on that or not. It's a zero tolerance. Nothing can be changed in the approaches to that and how to interpret the situation.
I'll be interested in where you see responsibility as finishing. There have been 2 major scandals, political scandals, just aside from the war for a moment, 2 major political scandals during President Zelensky's time, both revolving around corruption. In July, when they tried to curtail the activities of the National Anti-Corruption Bureau and the SAPO, the State Anti-Corruption Prosecutor's Office, 2 big issues that brought people out onto the streets. What do you think that says about this administration?
It says first about the strengths of Ukraine, that it's a democratic country and everything will be decided by the people, as was proved in 2005 and 2014, when something that was not right brought people to the streets and they choose the destiny for this country to live. And if we come back to the summer events, it should be viewed from different angles and from different perspectives. So when you are at war, you have to be careful at what is going on and happening in every governmental body, even independent one. And if there is the proof by intelligence that something is, well, rotten in the Kingdom of Denmark, it should be paid attention to. And it was not about dismantling the anti-corruption bodies, but it was more about making order in these bodies, because there were certain information about what was going on, some dealings connected to Russia, and it should be addressed and sorted out. That's the case. So you cannot just overlook and turn a blind eye when there are facts established by the bodies which are engaged in law enforcement. So this should be done carefully and attentively. It's not a one-way street. So during the war, the country should be strong.
Can you state categorically that scandal in July, the attempt to curtail NABU and SAPO, was unrelated to their work investigating corruption regarding the State Nuclear Energy Agency?
I'm not a judicial body, I'm not a court to say that, because there should be a ruling establishing all the facts. But at face value, this is the assumption, yes. They are not interconnected. Doesn't mean anything to July events and what is happening now.
How many more scandals of this magnitude do you think President Zelensky could withstand politically?
I hope there will be no scandals like that. And if there is, so those guilty, those culprits, will have to stand trial and to bear the responsibility.
Turning now to more military matters, we've seen what's happening in Pokrovsk, in Kupiansk, the recent push in the last few days by Russia in Zaporizhia regions and Dnipropetrovsk and that area there. Why do you think the line, albeit grindingly slow, but the line is only going one way in Russia's favor at the moment?
Because they throw their people into this grind mince and they don't care about the people. They make contracts for life or death, whatever you choose to call it. And this is the reason, because we care for the lives of the people, of the soldiers. And when there is no strategic significance in holding this line, the best option for the commander is to withdraw a little bit. But it doesn't mean that Russians are coming into our direction at a pace that does not allow us to control the situation. So strategically, it doesn't change the picture of the war. Yes, it may seem the line is moving towards our direction and not vice versa, but it's war and it's different dynamics. This time it moves this way, the next day it can move in a different direction. It's all about strategy and tactics.
Russia, as you say, have lost a huge number of men. I think the latest number was about 1.2 million casualties. What casualty figures has Ukraine suffered?
Well, this information is classified, and rightly so, so I will not give you the number that you expect me to give because I don't know.
Okay. Now, Mayor Vitaly Klitschko, the mayor of Kyiv, said recently in an interview with Politico that the conscription age should be reduced to 22 or 23. Do you agree?
Well, what I can say is that you can offer something to young people who are ready to be engaged on the battlefield. Why? Because they are most efficient on the battlefield. They act swiftly. They do it in a way that nobody can. They don't leave their wounded comrades on the battlefield, but we cannot allow to take them to the battlefield by force. It's also about democratic state. There is an offer. If they choose to use it, they can, but not differently. And another case is that if they agree, they know why they are doing it, because they defend their country, their land, their homes, their parents, in this case because they're young. And this is the biggest incentive for them to do that. It's up to them, it's their choice. It's not that they have to be coerced in doing it, but they are the most efficient.
How much political room do you think you have on the issue about the age of conscription? Are you feeling any pressure at all from society to lower the age, or are you feeling content with your policy?
Yeah, well, actually, again, I cannot say that it functions smoothly, because we are in a war and we have to look for different options, how to withstand, how to hold the line, how not to lose. And different options are on this platter. Again, up to young people to decide whether they're in or they are not ready. They don't feel up to that.
Do you think it was perhaps premature that the government's decision over the summer to allow men aged 18 to 22 to leave the country? In hindsight, was that either too generous in terms of age, or do you think the policy should not have been rolled out?
No, I think that was the right decision to do, because otherwise you can take it to the level when this can boil out the situation, and this was just to diffuse the tensions within society. They can choose to leave and to see whether they want to stay or to come back. You know, this, you let up the pressure. They go for some period of time just to take a respite. And in most cases, I don't think in all cases, but in most cases they come back. Because, well, what would you do if you go outside? Where will you find yourself? What's the purpose of your stay outside? Some of them may find what to do, for example, to study or to work or to do something else. But, well, when you are outside, you are outside. You don't feel at home. Again, it's up to you, your choice, your freedom of movement.
You describe society being a boiling point there, needing to have a pressure release valve or similar. What had taken society to that boiling point?
The war. It's a psychological war as well. So you cannot live under the constant pressure of your mental health being damaged on a daily basis by drones, by shaheeds, by this barrage of missiles. It comes in waves, so you cannot feel okay, relaxed, well, satisfied with what's going on. It hits on your brain, so your psyche is under pressure. And of course you need something just to settle yourself in terms of your mental health. So you need to adjust it to the situation. You cannot just live the same way every day. It's very, very tough.
Now, turning to business and the defence industrial complex, if I may, there was a recent article in The Economist that said that for all of Ukraine's amazing innovation, Russia is able to take that innovation, reverse engineer it, and then build it at scale, to a scale that Ukraine cannot, and at a tempo that Ukraine cannot. How are you going to get around that?
And that's the case because all economy of Russia works for war. It's a war economy, and there is no way back for them, at least now. Ukraine has capacities to produce drones, for example. This capacity is 35 billion USD. It's a great market with the potential of producing 20 million drones per year. We can finance around 20% of these capacities. The rest should be financed, so we need to find money to invest into this industry. Then we will not be behind Russia, we will be much ahead, because you have this capacity to do that. And that's why President Zelensky is talking on a daily basis with his counterparts in the European countries, in the United States, even in different continents in Africa and in some other places, trying to find this opportunity to invest. And the new war after this one, after Ukraine, will be a completely different picture. It will totally be technological, and drones will fight on the battlefield. You will not need as many people as are involved now from the Russian side, because this will be robots that will fight on the battlefield.
Now, you say you have the defense industrial capacity for $35 billion, and Ukraine's able to fund 20% of that. So you are still quite short to some degree. You know, you're looking for about $28 billion. Is that feasible? Do you think you can get that from the international market?
This is the space of the capacities that can be loaded. It's only about drones. It's not about other things, because Ukraine now produces around 40% of its armaments that is used on the battlefield. So we are not fully self-sufficient, but to a large extent. And this level is going up. So this number is growing from year to year. But it costs a lot, you know. So 40% of our budget go to the defense needs, because we did not start this war. We are defending ourselves. But it's war.
Yeah, and your GDP growth at the moment of about 2.3, 2.4-ish, which is on steroids because of the war. Your Treasury says you need about $65 billion a year to run the economy. How frustrating is it that Europe, Belgium, is sitting on circa 120 billion euros of frozen Russian assets, out more elegant minds than mine, which is most, still can't find a way to legally and satisfactorily use that money? What is the hold-up there?
Well, the idea is, first of all, it's about justice. This money should be used in the interests of Ukraine. These are money of the aggressor. And the logic is to use this money now when they are most needed. And if Russia agrees to pay compensation in the end, so this money will be reimbursed by paying compensation, they will get this money back. But if not, then this money must be used in the interest of the victim, which is Ukraine in this war.
Which takes us on to your reason, one of your reasons for being here in London. Our Foreign Secretary, Yvette Cooper, is going to welcome your Foreign Minister, Andrei Sybiha. They're going to be talking about the next steps on the 100-year partnership. But all I've seen so far, the press release talked about a schools partnership programme and £5.2 million for hospitals and roads in Ukraine. Now, our Foreign Secretary, Yvette Cooper, said Ukraine's security is our security. Given those numbers and the schools partnership program, do you believe her when she says that?
I believe totally in our strategic partnership, and it is guided by 3 documents that we have managed to sign with the United Kingdom starting from 2020. And it's about actually strategic partnership, it's about security agreement and 100-year partnership agreement. Starting from 2022, Great Britain allocated around 13 billion USD to help Ukraine militarily. And it's not all yet. So we are talking about the sum of 20 billion USD in total assistance to Ukraine. And on a yearly basis, United Kingdom committed to allocate 3 billion USD. So it's not only about school or something else, but that is very important, by the way. The schools, the meals, and the underground facilities for children to live a normal life and to study, even in the times of war. But we feel this shoulder and this support from the United Kingdom very much, and we appreciate that. It's turning around the joint philosophy that we share in this war, that the aggressor should be punished for the actions that he perpetrated.
What are you looking to get out of these talks in London today and tomorrow?
Well, we will touch base on the situation on the battlefield, so the war in Ukraine, then energy, then sanctions, then we will talk about how to return our abducted children back home, and actually we will set the stage for the leaders' meeting, because this 100-year partnership agreement envisages sessions on different ministerial level on 7 pillars, starting from foreign policy and ending with humanitarian and justice issues. When they are done, then the President of Ukraine and the Prime Minister of the United Kingdom will meet to take stock of the progress that has been achieved between our countries in the arc of this year.
And looking a bit more broadly, are you content with the progress of the so-called coalition of the willing? We haven't heard an awful lot about it in recent weeks. Any suggestion of planes in the sky, boots on the ground? There's a threat and a rattle of the nuclear saber from Russia, and then everything stops. No more conversation for weeks. So where are we with the coalition of the willing?
Well, the main thing is that this platform exists and it performs its function of political platform where leaders can gather and they can take stock of the most urgent needs. It's not only about deployment of the troops in Ukraine. We will come back to this right now, but it's also about the urgent needs, how to bolster Ukraine now. In every sector, it looks at the energy sector where we need now support badly. It looks at the assistance that we need on the battlefield, providing some kinds of weapons. And it looks, of course, on the reassurance force. The idea of the coalition was to deploy multinational force Ukraine once hostilities have ceased. And this is the main objective of this coalition of the willing. So during next sessions, we have to come up with the tangible results, which should be formulated in memorandum of understanding, for example, between all countries willing to deploy either their troops or to allocate what they can do for Ukraine once the ceasefire has been achieved. And this MOU on the deployment should be the tangible result in the nearest time.
And just finally, if we could sort of cycle back to where we started, you mentioned a little while ago that in the summer, the government felt that Ukrainian society was reaching boiling point and you needed to effect some sort of release and hence allow young men to leave the country. Do you feel the current corruption scandal linked to the lack of progress on the battlefield, the lack of progress on the international sphere with the coalition of the willing and a detached United States, shall we say, do you feel you are approaching another boiling point? And what happens if it boils over?
No, I hope not, because we don't have this luxury of boiling over, so to say. We have to stay united now more than in any other period of time. We need this unity in society, and nothing will be allowed if some cases are confirmed, some facts are established, then there will be no mercy for anyone. That's how you have to act and deal in the time of war. So I don't think this will influence society in a negative sense of the word, to scatter dissent in society. I think we still have to go to the very end of this war, because another option is defeat. So everyone will have to pack their things and to leave. And this will not happen. Whatever Russia wants, it will never happen. Ukraine will stand and will exist as an independent state. And after that, it will develop as it has been developing before, as a truly democratic state with the voice of people, the strongest will in this country.
Ihor Brusylov, Deputy Head of the Office of the President of Ukraine, thank you for talking to Ukraine the Latest.
Thank you. It's a pleasure to be with you.
So, shall we move to final thoughts? Francis, what do you got? What are you going to leave us with for the weekend?
Well, thanks, Dom. Our culture desk here at The Telegraph kindly asked me to review a new book about the collapse of the USSR called The Dark Side of the Earth by Mikhail Zygar, the founding editor of Russia's last independent news channel. I found the book interesting, especially on Gorbachev, who really managed to fool the West into believing that he was far more liberal than he actually was. And there are numerous examples that I talk about in the piece, not least where he was really cherry picking from Lenin. Even in the dying days of the Soviet Union, he was trying to read from Lenin that it was possible for reform to take place of a system that clearly, once you pulled one brick from it, the whole edifice was in danger, as it did, of collapsing. You couldn't remove terror, as it were, and restriction, or inject capitalism into this system, given how it was functioning in the end. And the book was interesting on that. But another, I think, key takeaway for me is it was sort of asking in this book, did the Cold War really end, or who won the Cold War? And in a weird way, I think the sort of conversation today about whether we're in Cold War II, and I don't think it's an unhelpful term necessarily, might also be somewhat misguided. And as I say in the piece, as the historian Eric Hobsbawm observed, it's rather peculiar, really, as conflicts go, the Cold War, because despite all of the apocalyptic rhetoric, deliberate war did remain perhaps unlikely. Accidental, but deliberate, was less likely. Both superpowers accepted the necessity of some kind of balance. But I would argue what we face today is something different. Putin and his allies want to overturn that equilibrium that was existing at the time of the Cold War. Putin has launched a war. These are not the gestures of a nostalgic man longing for the stability of bipolarity. So to call this a new Cold War is, one might argue, to underestimate it. The Cold War, for all of its menace, operated within boundaries both sides recognised. What we're witnessing now is the dissolution of those boundaries, gradually, particularly when you include the Chinese. The emergence of a world in which revisionist powers see chaos not as a danger, but as an opportunity. So in that sense, we're not reliving a Cold War, but are arguably entering the early stages of a hot one. So whether future historians conclude the Cold War never ended, or that one empire fell and another order emerged, will, I think, depend entirely on what survives this century's reckoning. But if you're interested in the latest on the historiography, on the analysis of the end of the Cold War and reassessments as a consequence of this war, then I recommend the review, which is written. It's about 1,400 words, and as I say, I'll link to it in the show notes.
Lovely. Thank you, Francis. I would like to leave with a couple of phrases that stuck in the old noggin this week. I was at the Magnitsky Human Rights Awards last night. This is Human Rights Awards in memory of Sergei Magnitsky, the lawyer who exposed corruption in the Kremlin. He was arrested, subsequently died in custody. It led to, a global movement, and it led to the US enacting the Magnitsky Act in 2012, which bars Russian officials believed to have anything to do with his death from entering the United States or using the banking system. It's since been rolled out in many, many other countries. So there were 10 awards, just a couple to bring to your attention. The Outstanding Opposition Politician went to the legitimate winner of the 2020 presidential election in Belarus, Svetlana Tsikhanouskaya. We've spoken to her before, hoping to speak to her again next week. And then the outstanding contribution to the global Magnitsky campaign, i.e. that campaign of rolling out the Magnitsky Act in different countries, went to Gabrielius Landsbergis, the former foreign minister of Lithuania, again, chap we've had on the podcast before. Now, he lamented the lack of countries and political leaders talking about Ukraine and sort of taking a firmer stance. And he came out with this phrase about why they are not doing so. He said talking about it means having to do something about it. And that's why so many are a bit backward leaning, shall we say. And that stuck with me. And I just think that's not a bad lens through which to judge contributions, shall we say, from other national leaders and countries. Talking about it means having to do something about it. That's very true. The other phrase that stuck in my head was from a movie I watched last week called Gold Run. It's the true story of Norway's successful effort to spirit away for safekeeping all the country's gold in the first few days of being invaded by Nazi Germany in the Second World War. Good movie, worth a look. In there was this line. One character said to the other, "Wars are not won by the few and the exceptional, but by the many and the ordinary." And I thought that was quite good. The point being that wars might be shortened by the few and the exceptional, special forces and roughy toughies doing all that kind of stuff, but they are won by the many and the ordinary. And it just struck me that that's all of us, folks. We're here, we do our journalism, you're there, you do what you can, which may be nothing more than taking an interest and thinking about Ukraine. So all of us together, we might not be able to do that much. We might not be Ukrainian. We might not be in Ukraine. But even the little things, I think, are the big things. So you and us, we are the many and the ordinary. We are a community. And we will be back on Monday, same time, same place, 1 o'clock London time. And I do look forward to your company. So I wish you all a very good weekend, folks.
Thank you, everyone. See you next week.
Ukraine the Latest is an original podcast from The Telegraph, created by David Nicholls. To support our work and stay on top of all of our Ukraine news, analysis and dispatches from the ground, please subscribe to The Telegraph. You can get 1 month free, then 2 months for just £1 at www.telegraph.co.uk/Ukraine the Latest. Deploying cutting-edge technology, we also release Ukrainian and Russian versions of this podcast. These translations retain our voices and delivery so that it can reach listeners in every region of Ukraine and those parts of Eastern Europe where Russian is still widely spoken. Links to those can be found in the podcast description to this episode. You can also now sign up to the new Ukraine the Latest weekly newsletter. Each week, Francis and I answer your questions, provide recommended reading, and give exclusive analysis and behind-the-scenes insights, plus maps of the front lines and diagrams of weapons, to complement our daily reporting. It's free for everyone, including non-subscribers. You can find the link to sign up in the descriptions for this episode. We regularly have a Ukraine live blog on our website where you can follow updates as they come in throughout the day, including insights from regular contributors to this podcast. We also do the same for other breaking international stories. If you appreciate our work, please consider following Ukraine the Latest on your preferred podcast app and leave us a review, as it really helps others find the show. Please also share it with those who may not be aware we exist. You can listen to this conversation live at 1 p.m. London time each weekday on X Spaces. Follow The Telegraph so that you don't miss it. You can also get in touch directly to ask questions or give comments by emailing ukrainepod@telegraph.co.uk. We continue to read every message. You can also contact us directly on X. You'll find our handles in the description for this episode. As ever, we're especially interested to hear where you're listening from around the world. Ukraine the Latest was today produced by Rachel Porter. Executive producers are Francis Dearnley, Louisa Wells and David Nicholls.
My name is David Nicholls. Thank you all for listening. Goodbye.